For years, I thought my anger was the problem. I treated it as something to heal, soften, regulate, reframe, metabolize, journal about, breathe through, meditate away, forgive away, or spiritually outgrow. I approached it the way many thoughtful, self-aware people do, assuming the anger was evidence that I still had a lot of work to do, or even that something was wrong with me. The more emotionally intelligent I became, the more suspicious I was of my own rage. I think a lot of emotionally intelligent people become so suspicious of their own rage because many of us were rewarded for being reasonable long before we were taught to be honest. We learned how to soften, how to understand, how to explain, and how to see both sides. And after a while, anger started to feel like a threat to the identity that kept us safe. If you've been loved for being easy, your rage can feel like it is putting that love at risk. So the fear is not only, I am angry. The deeper fear is, what will happen if I stop managing the truth? I learned how to understand people deeply. I could recognize childhood wounds, attachment patterns, nervous system dysregulation, trauma responses, generational conditioning, emotional avoidance, projection, insecurity, grief, fear, shame, all of it. I became exceptional at seeing the pain underneath people's behavior. What I did not understand at the time was that this capacity, while valuable, had also become a very sophisticated way of betraying myself. Every time something hurt, I rushed to understand the other person before fully allowing myself to register the impact. Disappointments became psychologically explainable, and emotionally malnourished interactions became something I could contextualize. Moments of loneliness became something I could turn into meaning before admitting how much it broke my heart. I became so compassionate toward other people's limitations that I slowly stopped taking my own emotional reality seriously. I think many of us have been here more than we would ever care to admit. I think understanding someone else becomes a way of betraying ourselves because understanding becomes self-betrayal when it starts replacing impact. It's beautiful to see why someone is the way that they are, but it's not so beautiful to use that knowledge to erase what their behavior did to us. We can understand someone's pain and still tell the truth about our own. You can have compassion for the wound and still say, "This hurt me." At some point, I understand why they are like this, cannot keep becoming the prayer we recite over and over again at the expense of our own abandonment. The body knows the difference between compassion and disappearing. Today's emotional culture celebrates empathy, nuance, self-awareness, flexibility, perspective taking, and emotional regulation, all of which matter. But there is a point at which self-awareness can become self-erasure. There's a point at which understanding everyone else becomes a way of no longer fully honoring ourselves. Many emotionally intelligent people are chronically disconnected from their own anger because they have spent years learning how to translate pain into something more socially acceptable. Many of us are rewarded for emotional generosity long before anyone teaches us discernment. It's like there's a script handed to us at birth that says, maintain relationships, preserve harmony, remain emotionally available, see the best in people, communicate softly, and avoid becoming difficult. Anger, particularly sustained anger, is the ultimate off-script behavior. It threatens everything we are taught. That's why so many of us become keepers of our own disappointment. We become experts in explaining why the behavior makes sense. We make excuses for people because they had a hard childhood, because they're emotionally avoidant or overwhelmed, or their family never communicated well. They're intimidated. They're doing their best. Or my personal favorite, because they love us in their own way. Sometimes those things are true, But truth does not erase impact. One of the most destabilizing realizations of adulthood is recognizing that you can deeply understand why someone behaves the way they do and still no longer be willing to absorb the emotional consequences of it. For a long time, I confused my exhaustion with oversensitivity. I wondered if I simply expected too much from people. My therapist helped me recognize a pattern. I was living inside relationships, conversations, and environments where I kept translating emotional absence into psychological understanding. Eventually, my body stopped cooperating with that arrangement. At first, my anger felt like irritation, then resentment, then depletion. As I got older, a strange emotional claustrophobia began to set in, where even small disappointments felt disproportionately painful because they were no longer isolated moments. They were touching years of accumulated undernourishment. The unanswered text is no longer just an unanswered text. That dismissive comment isn't just a dismissive comment. The emotional flatness, no longer just emotional flatness. You see the trend here. Everything starts touching the larger wound. I think we know when we're responding to accumulation and not overreacting when we ask what history the moment is touching. So sometimes a small thing feels huge because it's not small inside our body. Our body remembers everything. It's connected to all these years of feeling dismissed or rejected. It's years of being misread or being the one who had to make the relationship work. For some of us, we're talking about years or even decades of needing too little because needing more just wasn't safe. So when your whole system reacts, it's not dramatic necessarily. It's more like a memory. It may be your body finally refusing to keep treating a pattern like an incident. This is why so many of us are privately exhausted in ways we struggle to even articulate. Life has created an extraordinary number of emotionally disconnected environments masquerading as connected ones. We communicate constantly while rarely feeling deeply received. Ugh. Families remain in contact while emotionally bypassing one another for decades. Friendships continue long after mutual understanding has all but disappeared. And then social media creates the illusion of intimacy while eroding many people's capacity for genuine emotional presence. Meanwhile, an entire industry has emerged around helping people cope with emotional consequences of disconnection without necessarily telling the truth about its depth. The internet is flooded with healing language, empowerment language, nervous system, manifestation, self-worth, and spirituality language. Much of it contains truth. Some of it genuinely helps people survive difficult seasons. But then some of it also teaches people how to adapt to emotional deprivation rather than confront it honestly. There is tremendous pressure in our culture to remain emotionally evolved while continuously tolerating environments that make our souls feel abandoned. Real healing should make you more honest, not more adapted, not putting up with what's hurting you, more honest. We're not more fluent in the language of our own disappearance or erasure. We're becoming more honest. I keep repeating that. If language helps us explain away disconnection but not face it, we have to question it. If it makes us sound evolved while we're still abandoning ourselves, we have to question it. And if it makes us less honest about the impact, it's not healing. It's management. Oof. Real healing does not ask you to pretend something didn't matter. Real healing returns you to the truth you were trying to survive without saying. At some point, anger becomes intelligent. In my case, it began internally screaming, literally screaming. It felt like my inner child was having a tantrum. It pointed with brutal clarity toward the places where I had been chronically overridden, taken advantage of, used, belittled, ignored. My anger showed me who and what was not for me. It exposed how much energy I had spent managing, understanding, minimizing, excusing, spiritualizing, and surviving experiences that were simply destroying me. That is when I stopped assuming anger was dysfunction. Some anger is grief that has finally stopped negotiating. Some anger is instinct returning. Some anger is the nervous system refusing to participate in self-betrayal anymore. I no longer feel ashamed of my rage. There's wisdom inside it, even when it arrives with teeth, especially when it arrives with teeth. So what my rage showed me that being reasonable could not is that my rage showed me what reasonableness had been protecting me from knowing, meaning it showed me where I'd been too loyal to other people's limitations to keep the peace, to keep the relationship. It showed me which dynamics were no longer livable. Sometimes we just have to walk away. It's painful, but it's necessary. And some things cannot be made okay through understanding. Being reasonable helped me explain. Rage helped me see. And what it showed me was really simple. This is not working. This is not loving. This is not honest. This is not sustainable. Sometimes rage is terrifying because it's telling the truth so plainly that our old life can no longer survive it. I'm not saying anger cannot become destructive or that bitterness cannot distort or disrupt a life. Of course, unprocessed pain can fog our vision, but there is a profound difference between reactive cruelty and the sober recognition that something inside us can no longer continue living the way it once did. I think we can honor our rage without letting it take over our lives by listening for what the rage is protecting. Not just impulse or, every charge or flame, not every fantasy of destruction, but the truth underneath it. Sometimes rage is guarding grief. Sometimes it's guarding dignity. Sometimes it's guarding the part of you that has been waiting for years to stop making excuses for what hurts. Honoring rage does not mean burning down your life, although you're probably going to want to. It means stopping yourself from building a life around what keeps burning you. That recognition changes us. It changes what we tolerate, who we trust, what we normalize, the conversations we participate in, the environments our bodies can endure, and the charades we're just no longer willing to maintain in order to remain socially acceptable. I've become less agreeable since I started telling myself the truth. I'm less willing to overfunction emotionally inside one-sided dynamics. I can no longer translate emotional neglect into compassion for the people creating it. What looks like anger from the outside is often the beginning of discernment. And the moment we stop confusing endless tolerance with love, self-abandonment with empathy, and emotional suppression with maturity, the anger no longer has to scream to be heard. Oh, it's so refreshing. So here are some reader comments from Substack. This piece really kind of blew me away with the comments I received, and it made me feel a whole lot less alone. And I know for my readers as well, because this is something we simply don't talk about because this is taboo or shameful to be rageful, or outside of a punk rock band, you don't really hear people talking about rage or admitting that that's a good thing. So here's a comment that says, the rage was the signal the body kept sending while the mind kept explaining it away. Not dysfunction, not something to heal, the most honest thing in the room. What took years wasn't the signal arriving. It was running out of capacity to override it. And only you can read that signal. No therapist can tell you what the rage was really pointing at. That discernment is irreducibly yours. The work is developing the capacity to hear it and trust it before it has to scream to be taken seriously. And that's from Aware Life. Thank you for your comment and reflection. This feels so important because rage is often treated as the problem, when sometimes it is the first honest messenger we have left. Especially for women who were trained to be gracious, understanding, accommodating, and emotionally intelligent enough to explain away what hurt them. There's a kind of rage that comes from finally seeing clearly. It says something happened here. Something was taken. Something was normalized that should never have been normalized. And I am no longer willing to make myself softer just so other people can stay comfortable with what they did or refused to see. This piece names that so powerfully. Rage can be self-respect, returning to the body. And that's from Sandy Myers. Thank you, Sandy. I love this, Kate. Our rage is so sacred. It's such a tough realization that much of what our society recognizes as healing is really just learning to cope with an unhealthy environment. And that's from Anya. Thank you, Anya. This resonates. Beautifully written. You've managed to put into words what I've been experiencing and unable to articulate. I love the idea of finding the value in, the lesson within, our anger. Every emotion derived from pattern behavior serves a purpose. The maladaptive feelings can teach us if we examine their root causes. And that's from Casey Troutman. Thank you, Casey. Reading this was like coming home to myself. I no longer rage in public, but it is data for me to process quietly on what does not deserve me. And that's from Dr. Priyanka. Thank you. The rage was never asking to destroy my life. It was asking me to stop betraying myself inside it.